Hello, everybody. Facebook audience, welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, Facebook. Welcome, YouTube. I'm here all the way from Germany via Zambia. So Zambia is here. Tony Olobayo, Wale Olukoya, Kola David. Welcome everyone. Mesonge. Mrs. Abiola. Samuel Audu. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Samuel Adebayo. Mabel Apple. Helen Wellington. Nikki Okereke. Sally Adai. Innocent Magaji. Olivia Kisaka. Wale Banjoko. Well, for everybody that has come today, please go ahead and spread the message. Go and spread the word. Go invite your friends and family. Zadok Mudolo. Go invite your friends. Here we are with our hero today is from Zambia. Evans Lukomona. Evans Lukomona is from Zambia, and but he's resident right now in Germany with an amazing story. A very, very compelling story. Now, where should we begin? You are growing up in a very prosperous family. Well-to-do father, well-to-do family. Then you lost it all in one day. And from at the age of 14, you made up your mind to get everything back and put your family on top again. Tell us that story.
Sure. Thank you. First and foremost, I would like to thank you, DSA, for having accorded me this kind of a chance to come on the air, to be interviewed, and to share, some values and things, that I've gone through right in my life that I believe may as well translate to, uplifting others that are listening to me who could have been going through the same things. And also, I would love to thank, mostly your effort having according, you to the world to offload. I know it's not that easy. And at the same time, I would love to thank your children as well. They are growing up so well. If they are growing up so astray, you wouldn't be sitting, here to educate us and to, expose people that you feel you should. Yes, getting back to my life, I was born, like they said, about 49 years ago in the third city of Zambia called Kitwe, in the Copper Belt. As you know, Zambia was still then the second largest producer and exporter of copper in the world.
Can you please move a little bit right now? That's good.
Oh, great. So I was privileged to be born out of a father who was so an entrepreneur, and he was one of the very few people, to travel there in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s to Europe. And we didn't live in like a high-class, community or constituency. But my father, because he was so helpful to other people, he loved the tour, he decided, despite pressures from other people, probably even my mother, I remember one time, why don't we live in the high-rise and stuff? My father said, no, we belong here. So we lived in the middle-class area called Chimwemwe, where all of us 9 students, we were born. And life was okay. Papa, my father, my parents, both of them were ardent Christians from the United Church of Zambia, more or less like Anglican, something like that. And my father was quite wealthy. He had some supermarkets, one of the top supermarkets right in an area called Parklands for rich people. And we had everything. We never missed anything. We went to good schools and the like. But I remember so well, like when I was in class 9, some things started changing. Though you know that time, parents in general wouldn't get back to the children. Okay, my children have lost my job or this and that. But we just noticed something that changed. Father started staying home. Then one of the fine days I remember, we started suspecting something because our household was full of, ornaments, TVs and stuff from Europe. It was so beautiful. One of the fine days he just woke up and said, "Let's call your friends, go and sell the television set and this and that." And we were the only family with a TV set, in the air. But Father, why and everything? Later on, I asked my mother, I said, "I don't understand. Father is selling all these things and, these are our belongings." Mama said, no, don't worry, just, it's all right, everything's okay. But one of the fine days when I was coming from school, I found that everything was outside. Thank God it was not rain season and the doors were locked. I asked my mama, "What's happening?" My father didn't answer. Said the council had locked the house because your father didn't pay rent. For all of us as a family, if much more neighbors, it was unheard of. Papa used to help the neighbors with food and anything. Yet their houses were not closed, but ours was. And, that day I remember my mother assigned us, if us were going to sleep by your friend Oscar, and that night I didn't sleep. Of course, I was an average student in school, and, I loved football so much. I spent much more time playing football to concentrating on school because I wanted to become a professional at one time. So after that kind of a moment, I remember in the night I didn't sleep so well. And I promised God, I said, no, I'm going to bring back my family together and the work which our Papa has lost. Because immediately all left school except myself, I think, and my brother, because Papa couldn't pay the fees. Then time went on, and what happened, I went to visit my sister in Lusaka. Then I saw around, I said, my sister, I want to come back here and start some business. Even capital city is so hard, you can't make it. You need to be rich. If Daddy had money, you are going to borrow some money from him, then come and start some stuff. Then I said, okay, I want to be coming back. That was in class 9. Then through time, I went, after about 3 years, I finished my class 12. And I said to that time now, my father was almost depressed because of what he had lost, and everybody had run away from him. And I told my father that I want to be going to Lusaka to enter college and start business. But if you don't have transport money, I said, no, I'm going to manage. I told my mother, I won't come back here until I have found a formula to help, the relatives and other people. So fortunately enough, I had a friend who helped me with some kind of transport money to travel to the capital city. And I went to Lusaka, that's our capital city of Zambia. And there, I entered college to study science technology because my intention, I was among the people that were promised to go and further study in Saudi Arabia and later on work in, the Arabic countries. So I started studying. While I was at college, I remember life was so hard, and no pocket money and everything. So one of the fine days, I just, a friend of mine, my roommate, I said, come on, man, we can suffer like this. Let's go out. I know mathematics to secondary schools and look for children who can teach, and they pay us some money. He just told me, Ibas, you are not thinking properly. You are not a teacher and this and that. Who's going to allow you? Then I just told him, I remember that day, it was a Wednesday. Okay, here's my card for the dining hall. Get my food. I want to back. I didn't have money. I didn't have papers. I just went out like that to one of the secondary schools. The headmaster asked me, young man, what do you want here? Then I told him, I'm looking for some children to teach mathematics. Are you a qualified teacher? I said, no, but I'm a scientist. I'm studying science. He said, no, we can't trust you with my children. So I came back down, heads down. Then there was an intervention. One of the teachers saw me. He was teaching, within the school. Then he says, young man, come here. He called me then and said, what are you doing here? Because he saw me standing, thinking which way forward. Then I told him the story. Then he says, you can teach mathematics. I've got a lot of pupils who are so bad. Then I said, but I'm not allowed to talk to them. He says, you close the door. It was the beginning of everything. Then they talk to them whatever you want to talk to them. I told the boys and girls, Those who have got mathematical problems, 3/4 of the class, I said, I'm the solution. I want to come on Saturday at this college, and I'm going to be teaching you. They registered. I remember it was about 30 who registered. I didn't even go to another school. That was a Wednesday. Saturday, I was oversleeping. I had forgotten that, going to this school. On a weekend, neighbors came. Evans, there are a group of pupils looking for you. I said, come on, what's it? I went outside. It was a huge group. There were about 40 of them. Sir, you came to our school. I didn't know where to take these students. And I went to the lecture theater where college students were studying. I accused myself, please, I want to use this lecture theater. I had no chalk, I had no pencils, I had no books. Then I brought all the boys and girls in that room. The DSL can't believe it because my specialty was mathematics and chemistry. Then I told them, today I'm only going to teach you mathematics and chemistry. I taught them for about 6 hours. The word went out. The next Saturday, I had double class. And the other Saturday, I went to some place where could I rent, a room. It's a private school. They said, no problem, you can use it here. Then I started teaching them, and I told my friend who is a physicist from University of Zambia, my friend, you come and help me with physics and biology. And so the school started from tuitions, Saturdays only, solutions with Mr. Major, because my nickname was Major, like a Major of the Earth with Mr. Major. But something happened in BFA where I realized that this truly was my calling. Because all students...
Were they paying? Were they paying?
Oh, sure, they were paying. They were paying. Yeah, I saw, my hierarchy started rising at college as one of the people now making money every Saturdays. But one intervening Saturday was when I was teaching mathematics, and my friend was waiting for his physics somewhere in a restaurant. I saw a Mercedes-Benz parked outside, black Mercedes-Benz with a flag. Because in Zambia, when you see a flag, it's got something to do with the government. So came out, the car, a tall soldier with a walkie-talkie or Walkman, something like that. Then he came direct to my door. Then he says, it's sorry, sir, to disturb you. Then I said, no, because in Zambia, to talk to a soldier, it's something you have to be answerable and kind of stuff. Then he says, I'm looking for a gentleman called Mr. Major. And I was the one. Then I said, Lord, should I say I'm the one or not? Then I chickened out. I told him, I said, oh, Mr. Major, actually, it's supposed to be here, but he will be coming. Then, what time is he coming? Then I said, I'm not, but he's going to be coming. Then he went back to the Mercedes-Benz through the window. He talked something. Then he came back. He says, okay, when he comes, tell him we are going to come back, that I'm with the country's vice president's wife, with the daughter, because she heard about Mr. Major. She wants to learn mathematics from me. Then immediately I said, I'm sorry, sir, I am the one. So the man said, he pats me, come on, now, my wife wasting time, come on. Sorry, why are you scared? I said, no, sir, I've never been approached by a uniform. So then he went back and he called Mrs. Mianda, Jeff Mianda was our vice president then. Oh, this is Mr. Major himself. So, oh, my son, don't get scared. How much do you charge? I couldn't even mention the figures. And she just pulled out brand new quarters, not counting. And I put them, my friend didn't know, what was happening. And the story started from there. The daughter joined, and thereafter I knew it was something really, really serious. And what do I do? Because after that daughter came, another minister brought another child, Saturdays only. Then I said, no, I have to open a school, parallel to my college studies. And I went to one of the former member of parliament or ministers.
What year was that?
That was in 1992. That was 1992.
Who was the president that time?
That time the president was Frederick Chiluba.
Yeah. Okay.
Chiluba. He had just 1 year after, he had just taken over from our first president, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda,
yes,
who later on brought his grandchildren to me. So when that happened with our vice president, I realized this is God's calling. I went back, I told my friend from University of Zambia, I said, I'm going to look for a beautiful school because now we are attracting the elite. Then I went to Mrs. Petronella Kisanga. She was a great person in the government, in the first government, and she retired. She built a beautiful international school. Then She asked me, young man, you want to rent my school? Look at my school. Who are you? And stuff. I said, no, madam. She says, I don't want anybody to dent my school. I said, I can't dent it. Listen, Dr. Adelaja. She told me, okay, I'll give you that room. Just teach, because I want it now Monday to Friday, like full time, in the evening when I'm done with college.
Okay. In the
evening.
Yeah,
when I'm done with college, then in the evening, like extra tuition starting from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. She told me, okay, you've got a room, but there's no office for you. You'll be sitting outside, visitors bench. So I'll be there waiting for my, little students. And one of the fun days, something happened again. I really thank God what I've gone through. I was not there. I'm going to buy some food somewhere. Then our first president, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, he had just come out of prison because Chiluba locked him up. And normally he had this kind of secular visits during the school holidays. All his children, like grandchildren, he would say, this year the family is coming, another is the family from the US and everything. So this time he had received 5 grandchildren, I think from US and the UK. Then had problem with mathematics. And they had heard about me through Jeremy and they said, no, our children are doing well because of this man. So he went to my old school, he sent his bodyguards to my old school at Lusaka, where I was renting, started on. He said, no, that man moved, he's now in Chadley, at Chadley House School. Then I was not there, he came, according to people who were there, and my colleague says I'm looking for this young man called Major, surrounded, but they were looking flashy, the children from UK and US. Then he signed the form, and my daughter Kaunda, and he paid the fees. When I came back, my colleague told me, guess who came here? Look at the signature. I said, you are fooling me, and it's true. Later on, the owner of the school, Mrs. Petrona Sanga, she figured out our first president was at the premises. Immediately, DSA, she told me, young man, don't sit outside on the benches. You're going to be sharing. She didn't give me another office. She said, you are going to be sharing the same office with me, which she didn't even share with the principal of her school. Now jealousy started between the principal of her school and me, because she gave me the keys. I could enter her, chief executive office. She started inviting me. She said, look, young man, you have got something to, workshops and business fellowships. People are coming from England, and I would be the youngest then with my young brother. What are you doing, Petronella? What are you doing with these boys?
How old were you at this point?
I was about 24, 25, somewhere there. I was about 24, 25. Then thereafter, I realized, now I was there, I attracted all the government people, started coming to my institute. They stopped because I started the campaign, save your dollars and educate your children right here in Zambia. And instead of you spending...
Save your dollars.
Save your dollars and educate your children right here in Zambia. And part of those dollars, help the poor. That was my philosophy and my slogan. Then I went on TV, national TV. I spoke about the same. I came out in newspaper and the like. Then I moved from that because now my institute was growing so much. And I found another institute, full-time now, along Cairo Road, the business district in Zambia. I opened that institute, and I opened another 2 institutes in Cairo Road, another one in the capital city, and in another city. And I remember now, my problem was, only the elite who had money sent their children to go and study the foundation programs before you enter university. So those who are not from the rich family, they ended up just, doing these other jobs because we only had 2 serious universities in the country. So the cut-off point was so high that even if you had passed, you couldn't. Then I went to our Minister of Education. I said, look, sir, why don't we do this, localize? We import these programs from England, bring them so that we can educate the masses. No, young man, you can't do it. I said, I've got a plan. Because that time I researched, I put all the tools together, and they called me by the permanent secretary for interviews at the ministry. It was so splendid, but because of jealousy, they kept pushing me. Then I said, okay, I'm going to start these programs at my institute. Then they said, okay, young man, we are going to allow you to operate for 1 year. If you fail, then it's going to be a problem. Then I taught my brother in England, John. He was studying there, his PhD, and I want to come there and do some cooperations. He said, but you've never taught me such kind of levels, because he was not such kind of a person, you know. And then I said, no, it's all right. I've done the groundwork. Then he invited me. I went to England and I visited Cambridge University, Birmingham, and mentioned them, you know, thesis which I'd written to bring, you know, programs. Then they said, fine. Auburn College was number one and part of about 19 universities. So they gave me those programs, the foundations, the undergraduate and the master programs. Things changed in Zambia. Now the question was, because no institute that time was offering at foundation bridging courses to university, was offering law, business studies and economics, because what was there was only mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology. But my saying was, no, there's no way you can teach somebody who want to become an economist or a lawyer, mathematics and chemistry. These are for scientists. So we have to have different streams, science stream, arts, business. And but where do you get the lawyers to teach? They're expensive. I said, I'm going to get them. So I went to the High Court. I asked the secretary to do some posters who can teach. Then some lawyers came through, some big lawyers, young man, but can you pay me? I said, it's not about payment, let us change our country. And so I introduced law, legal studies at foundation, and students did so well with universities. And one striking thing was that parallel, I introduced a department called the Free Education for Street Kids, FIRST Kids. And I told the money that you are paying us, part of it goes to supporting the street children. It was very hard because the elite were in my institute. Now, how do we, you know, blend together with the street kids? And I had to do a lot of workshops. I had to counsel these students. Something can happen to you. You never know. You may be a street kid as well. And until later on, they got accepted. And United Nations pledged to support me through the street kids. Though later on, things couldn't work out. The government hijacked my project, and so on and so forth. Thereafter, my college became international. It came in magazines in the United Kingdom. We were rated as one of the best institutes. Then I remember going to the government, because my focal point was to build the very first private university in Zambia. Now I was going towards that. Everybody was had proven me right. And I went to the Mrs. Jimpanga, our Minister of Lands. She even gave me piece of land document, and the government is going to give me $50,000 to start structure. I said, oh, this is a bigger. Then thereafter, it never came to pass. And the Chinese now were coming so much to, in Zambia. That was around now 2002. And I was really against, because they were taking over everything from Zambia, everything, jobs. Then I got involved not as a political activist, but as an educationist. I would create forums to discuss what's happening in the country, and students would comment and everything. Then I didn't know that had entered, some factions, someone here and there. One of the fine days in 2004, I was at the British Council with the Canadians discussing, the school reforms and the like. So I was one of the speakers there. And my phone rang. Unfortunately, I had forgotten to put it off. My phone rang. It was my vice principal, Mr. Mulenga. It said, I didn't pick. I just, I'm in a meeting, serious meeting. Why should you call me? Then again it rang. I said, oh, come on. So I was about to go. I told my secretary, Doreen, I said, please, you talk to him. He knows what I'm doing. Then Doreen just called me from the British Council. Sir, this is Mr. Sir, we are losing everything. Can you come right away? I said, what do you mean? There are trucks, police force, trucks and trailers, they are parking computers, because I had built my institutes for no loan, no single money. I built everything just from a ream of paper which I printed, distributing under it until I went through. So I was so confused. I excused myself from British Council. I said, something has happened. I can't talk now. I will be coming in the evening session. I could believe my eyes. I talked to one of these police forces. What's happening? Don't talk to us and everything. I called my lawyer. My lawyer came. He was trying to, stop, and everything. Nothing happened. As I was doing that, that was in Lusaka Kai Road. As I was doing that, my phone rang from another city. His principal who was running the Panda show at that time. Sir, could you come to Ndola today, tonight, or tomorrow? Then I said, no, Mr. Panda show, I'm solving a problem here. We have got, we are surrounded and this and that. He says, no, that's what is happening here as well. I really thank God for my strength. I said, what could be this? So I said, okay, hang on. When we solve everything, I can travel to Ndola. That's how I wrote everything. There was no clue. Then I received a letter from the government that I was not paying tax, but my records were as plain white as this paper. Taxes were up to date, everything. I lost my money in the account. And as I was doing that, same day, I'm going home now in the evening, running up and down with the lawyer here and there. That time I was keeping my mother, my father, everybody, home, because I lived in a mansion, because next door, I put in another mansion to serve as a body, for my students coming from Botswana and stuff. Then I found from the house where I lived, it was locked. My father was in his sickness, just on the roadside, the beds. I said, what's happening here? What's happening? Then the neighbor says, no problem, you can sleep here. So I remember that time with my wife's parents, also the mother had visited. So we had to share 2 rooms. We slept like corpses. Then following day, I started jumping up from, this and that, the lawyer, nothing. Then, what had I done? I asked my landlord along Carroll Road.
Was that a, how will you call it? Was it a political attack or it was a legitimate tax evasion situation?
And what happened, it was, some friends that I had worked with, who had defected or who had fired, had to partner up with, some political figures and insinuating Evans for the opposition. That's why the story came out later on, because I remember surviving on, I think, 3 occasions, surviving gunshots. One just by the doorstep, and the other time I was buying bread, just, on a small kiosk. I'd lost everything. This gunman didn't touch anybody. He just came to me, lie down. And I said, please don't kill me. I've got children. And he shot in the air. He shot again twice in the air. And he didn't say anything. He didn't tell me anything like, this is what you've done. And he left until people woke me up. And I died to my home. So up to this time, then one of my cousins who worked for sorry to say this, because cases are, were in courts, and who worked for the OP we call Office of the President. So I'm not supposed to mention his names here. Just tell him, no, Evans, just keep your life. You've got children and everything. Don't get involved into it. I said, I've never gotten involved in anything. I'm not a politician. When I talk about politics, it's just references, about economy and kind of thing. Because I was so much a big voice, there was that kind of a perception. Then I couldn't retrieve. Lawyers started resigning. I get this lawyer today. He just calls me, Evans, I can't represent you. And why, sir? I've paid you some money. I will pay you. No. Another lawyer, 2 days, I can't represent you. I think I changed about 6 lawyers until nobody wanted to help me. Then I said, let me start looking for a job. I was qualified to do, the job, teaching. Nobody had to give me a job. And then my sister, that was 2000, in around October, after now, my wife was gone, and I was coming from somewhere.
Why did your wife leave? Because you lost everything?
I should think so, yes, DSA, because I'm sorry to take on media and for some people, to understand and learn from my topic. I done everything to my wife. She was pushed by her mother, whom I loved so much, because she had no father, and I took her mother just as my mother. I did everything, even without the knowledge of my wife. I would send money, trying to build a house in the village. Then later on, my wife's cousin whom I kept. When I found that she was gone, I said, "Are you guys?" Because I entered the bedroom, everything was gone, everything was clean. Then he told me in the morning, "I'm sorry." She was forced by the mama to leave. Why should you there just back and go? But I remember pleading her, coming back for months and months. I couldn't even see my children just from a distance. It was so hard. Even the time I was coming to Germany, she didn't allow me to see, the children properly. Just 1 second, okay, I'm going. They didn't know I was coming for 10 years. But I thanked my sister. She said, "Give us, enough is enough." So far now, dad is dead. Because dad died. Mama died at the same time, same year, my sister. So then my sister, German Christian, she was already married to a German doctor and was already here 12 years. She says, "Come and try it in German. I know you can make it, my brother."
So when you lost everything, that same year, your dad died, your mom died, and your sister died. 3 people dead under in 1 year.
Yes. It was really a tragedy. It was really a big tragedy. It was really a big tragedy. Then I had to say bye to my children, and I just said, "Let me go to Deutschland." Though a lot of people thought in Germany is a hard country, difficult, you can't make it. My brother was calling me from England. He was now a doctor lecturing in university and some colleges. He had opened his college as well. Come and work together. And I said, "No, I think I want to try. I know UK system, US system. Let me try to complete myself with Germany." And it was hard when I came to Germany. First 3 months I was with my sister and a brother-in-law. I told them, "No, I have to go on my way." She pleaded me to stay until, my roots. Then I said, "No, I don't want to be disturbing you, and I can make it." So I started renting 1 room because my sister paid for me that 1 room, and now to feed my children. They were
to come to Germany was going to be harder because you couldn't speak the language.
Yes, because in fact that was one of the things. I couldn't speak the language, and normally when you are looking for something, you just have to be forced to do it. Within that first 3 months, I started learning the language through YouTube slowly and online, and I had subscribed by some institute. Though I only did the first part 4 weeks because I had to find a job. Now, a hard job, at Crow Company, it's a car company washing cars, and I remember it was winter. It was winter, snowy, and it was outside, with gloves, using hot water which could turn from 100 degrees Celsius within 10 minutes. The water is freezing. And I told my boss, I said, "Come on, I have to do 100 cars every day, and 50 cents, something like 50 cents per car." But I had no option because at the end of the month, I think I would get something like 250 euros, which was nothing. So I was just, my sister told me, "Okay, you can be sending everything, then I will be giving something for food." So I would send, 200. I tell my sister, no. I send 200 to my children, then I keep, something for myself. From there, I joined, somebody invited me to go and work in a big restaurant, a German restaurant in the outskirts of Hamburg, Outersland. They promised me you're going to be getting 800 euros. I said, "Oh, this is a breakthrough and stuff." It was now more than hell because I would go there, sleep there from Monday to Saturday, work 24 hours, which I would calculate back into like 3 euros per hour, which was nothing. And when I came back home, which I rented, people didn't even know, because when I came back on Saturday evening, because I was so tired, I would sleep Saturday evening, Sunday evening without going to church, only waking up on a Monday when I have to go back. So I became like this. I couldn't cook. I had no energy to cook. So I worked there, I think, around 1 year. Then I quit. I found another job in a restaurant. Now it was in the central. I would work normal hours. And I started making some good money there. I had no work permit. So one of the fun days, it was a Saturday, my nephew in Lusaka, Eddie, lost a baby, died. At the same time, my young brother, who is a pastor, Newton, was getting married. So before I went to my restaurant to work, I went to an Afro shop to buy a scratch card so I could call Christine, my sister from here. She had gone to Zambia to witness the wedding. I wanted to tell Christine, please don't do the wedding, cancel until you bury the boy, because the wedding was in another city again. You guys, you can get down here. As I was scratching this card, crossing the robots, going to my job, it was 9:30. What I saw was like 10 police with guns on me. 10 police with guns. So I started, smiling. Bring the car keys, bring the car keys. In German. I said, ich habe kein Auto. I don't have a car. Ich habe leider kein Auto. Come on. Then I had only one small bag here. And in that bag, there was a book which I received because I was using the postal address of my sister. My sister had given me a Christian book, which came book from Christian Mission or something like that in England. So they took my bag to search for the keys. Then they took the handcuffs to lock me up. I said, please, in my life, I've never tested those handcuffs. I'm a peaceful person, just take me well. Lucky enough, the police was just across the road. They took me up. I had a red cap, a red T-shirt, and a black track bottom. Then they said, no, you are a criminal. You were in St. Pauli. St. Pauli is a criminal prostitution area. You stole a car with some two German guys. I said, please, I don't even know if you have been to that, area. They took me up. Now, DSA, anybody who would look at this picture, because they recorded video, would say it was me. So they brought now the screens, they were moving. This guy had also, it was a black guy, black glasses, but he was captured from this end. Black glasses, red cap like me, red T-shirt. But thank God, the bottom was totally different. So they zoomed, and it's like the guy had a previous criminal record somewhere. They said, no, you're not the one. But what do you have to dress? They started joking, like same colors. I said, no, but the company doesn't only make for one person. I just bought it. Then they said, oh, sorry. They gave me back my bag. Okay. As I was about to open the door, then one big boss came and said, did you check his step permit? Then I said, oh, God.
That is residence?
Residence, yes. Because I didn't have residence permit. Because I had a German friend who told me, no. She was going to help me to process everything and stuff. But, she was buying time until I was like 2 years, 6 months.
So you had overstayed in the country for 2 years and 6 months, no permit, no residence permit, and no work permit.
For sure. No work permit, for sure. So normally when they control you, it's not control. They control you like that. You're even 2 days. That day you are on the plane going back to your country. Then I said, no, sorry, I don't have a permit. Then they said, no, how do you survive? I said, no, my sister and this and that. He said, check his fingerprints. They checked, normal. It was a screen, clear. They said, unbelievable, unglaublich means unbelievable. Then they started finger, left, right, clear. They took my toys off my feet. Everything was clear. They caught me like around 9:30 in the morning. They finished all the processes just to make sure on me like 20 hours. Then they drove me to a prison. I was alone. I didn't know where I was going. We drove like 1 hour. The next thing, I didn't know, they didn't tell me, you are going to prison. The next thing I saw was gate opening, boom, and prison warders. Then I know, oh, Lord, yeah, I am. That was a Saturday. I was so worn out, hungry, I didn't eat anything, and I remember only water from the police when they were getting me. And I slept. I planned to sleep like up to 2 o'clock the following morning. 6:30 in the morning. Boom. He opened the door. The prison warder says, you are going to the court today. What? The court? What I know, courts work Monday to Friday. So I said, okay, Zonta, today is Sunday. He closes. I said, Lord. Then I prayed. I remember I prayed, and nobody knew I was in prison and nothing. Then around 7:30, the same guy came with another one. They want to put me to go to the court now. I think some 20 minutes from the prison. I said, please, I've never been in this. I promise you. Then we went through the tunnels, it was underground, tunnels, you know, until in the court session. And I was the next. I entered the court session.
That was on a Sunday. The court was working on it. The court was working on a Sunday.
Surprised. It was a Sunday DSA, and the people, you know, with white, the jury were sitting, warders, mentioned the names. It was like, you know, 15 or so. And I was down. Then there was an elderly lady here. She greeted me. Mr. Evans, I said, yeah. Then she said, I'm your translator. I said, but who brought it to me? She says, no. This is what it is. Then I said, okay, I speak German, but not perfect. It would be great. Then Judge Swepe, I remember his names. The judge said, Mr. Lukomona, where is your lawyer? I said, sorry, sir. One, I didn't know that I was going to come to court, because for me, it's an unusual thing to, you know, courts to work on a Saturday. He said, oh, it works. You don't have a weapon? Then I said, no. Then he turned around to his people. He was so angry. Why didn't you tell him, you know, why do you have to bring him? He's going to, because in Japan, they are so flexible, they want everybody to have lawyer in anything. Then he was talking to them and the like. Then he says, okay, you go and bring your sister, come and sign a bill for you. I'll send you back home, come back with your lawyer. I said, unfortunately enough, my sister is out. What about your brother? Oh, he's also out of shape. Then he says, I'm sorry, I have to keep you. And then I said, what about, can my pastor come? Then he decided to say, no, only those two. No, but sorry, I will keep you here until. Then I told him, I intervened, I said, but your horn, I can talk, you know, over myself. Then, sure, I said, yes. Then you start, mind you, we are recording everything. So I gave all my background, everything. I spoke for about, like, you know, 20 minutes. So he shook his head. I remember, it's only that, you know, it's not allowed to, you know, that's why I started gathering some confidence. Then he says, wow, unbelievable. Why should, you know, your country let such a person like you? Then I said, I didn't say anything. I said, oh, anyway, it happens. Then he says, do you have any contacts? People who can, you know, who knows that I tell some people that you are here. Then I said, yeah, but they are in my phone. And the ways of phone, my phone is with the police officer somewhere. DSA, he came from there, he told people, he came down, he put me, let's go. We went to the police warders, he got the phone, give him back his phone. He gave it to me, switch it on, I switched it on. Then he gave me a pen and paper to write all the numbers. I wrote, I think, about 20 or more numbers before he could call. Then he said, okay, I will be going home. When I go home, I'm going to call you know, all these people for you. But I just want to tell you that I'm going to assign a lawyer, a friend of mine, to you. She's quite good. And I want you to lead a good life in Germany. Because me already I'd known if you had overstayed for 2 to 3 weeks, then just 2 to 3 weeks, there's no, you know, like, let's discuss and the appeals and the like, you are deported. It's called a red button. You are on a red button to go back home. Then he was, no. So, okay, I said, thank you so much, sir. And the police took me to the prison. Following, after 2 days, I think, came the police. There's a lady who wants to talk to you, my lawyer. Then she was in the cube. To my amusement, you know, I expected a serious discussion, like how do we go about it. I wanted to plead her, madam, I've got children and everything. I want to start my new life here. 10 minutes we were talking about social life. She said, I'm told that you play music in church. I said, oh yeah, I play some keyboard and some guitars, I sing too. She says, I know, with my husband we got a studio. When you come out of prison, can you come, we do music together? Then I told her, I said, madam, but my case is so serious. Then she says, no, I'm going to come out. And she told me, how many weeks can I give you to write about yourself? I clean it up and give it to the government. She said, then I told her I don't need 2 weeks. You can give me 1 hour. I'll write a post about myself. Then she said, okay, I'll come back tomorrow. Then overnight, I remember asking the prison warder for more papers. Normally, you're allowed to get 2 papers maximum to write a letter to your family. So I told the prison warder, I did about 50 papers. He said, no, it's not allowed. I said, no, I want to write. My lawyer asked me, I want to write something about myself. He has to do. Then he consulted and they put me a ream of papers. So overnight, I wrote everything, references to England, I'm cooperated with. I could remember some names, Open College, Dr. Granger, and different stuff. So the lady came in the morning. She was so amazed. The document was ready. Then she says, okay, I will only now come back on the material day of your last, whether you have to go back to Zambia or you have to stay in Germany after 20 days. Then I said, oh, fine, thank you. If you've got anything, just write me or tell them to call me. So there was nothing. But in between DSA, it started like a negative thing. I really learned quite a lot of things in prison. Just that I made a mistake. They put me on criminal prison. The warder, a lady said, no, what did you do to be here? You're not supposed to be here. But while I was there, you remember there was this worldwide problem by the pirates from, I think the pirates who were guarding the ships, American ships and everything, because they were jailed in Germany, those pirates. And they were in an exclusive, prison. Not knowing they were my neighbors, that's why they put me. But one thing that happened was, every day, 1 hour, you have to walk around in prison just to get fresh air. Then I said, oh, the African friends. So I walked towards them. There were 2. We did hands. All eyes now, police were on me. How do I know those people? So we chatted and everything. They asked me, are you a Muslim? No, I'm a Christian. After we had talked, they didn't say anything. But following morning, the police now came so much to my room to interview more. I didn't know.
Those pirates, where were they from?
They were from
Somalia.
I think Somalia. From Somalia. It was a big news worldwide.
Yes, I remember.
Then the following day again, I was with them. Because when they asked me I was a Christian, I said I was a Muslim, I said I was a Christian. So we started, Christian-Muslim discussion. So I said, no, tomorrow we continue the topic. Following day, I didn't know they were pirates. Following day, then I said, after we discussed, but you guys, what brings you here? They said, you mean you don't read newspapers, you don't watch TVs? I said, no, we are the pirates. Then my body moved. That's why you see, you are the only one who is so courageous to be with us. Others can't even take our hands. Then, and it ended up there. So to cut the story short, DSA, inside the prison, I remember, of course, I asked for a guitar. I told the prison what I want to send for a keyboard to play. No, we don't allow instruments here and the like. Then they just refused me. Then after 2 days, one bishop, white German man, came with a big bag. Mr. Lukomona Evans, I said, yeah, one time you requested for a keyboard, but I am a chaplain, so this is a guitar you can play and bring it back. I said, oh, thank you. But that prison was full of Muslims. I think I was the only Christian. So when I was playing loud, quietly, everybody would come, oh, play it out. I said, do you like Christian music? So I became, a superstar in prison, and they gave me my own fridge. This was now free. The prison warders, they started calling me Mr. Director because, I started evangelizing, especially to young boys, because most of them were drug addicts and
they were calling you Mr. What?
Sorry?
What were they calling you?
Mr. Director. Mr. Director, yes, in the prison. Now, this was confirmed by my brother-in-law, Dr. Folkman, my sister. When they came back after 20 days, like tomorrow I'll be in prison for decision-making. I mean, in court, decision-making. So, a day before, families come. It's a long, long queue. He told me, even you really shocked us with my wife. When we came, it was a long queue. People registering their names. I want to see this one. But now, when it was about 10, I just mentioned the first name. We are here for Evans. The policeman. Oh, Mr. Director. Oh, Lukomona. So They were shocked. They brought me, and normally we were supposed to be in a pool, talking through telephone and everything. So me, I was given VIP. I went there to meet my relatives for tomorrow's session. My brother-in-law asked me what I should tell the court because they had written in my letter that we are going to cross-examine you about Evans. So what should I tell the court? I said, Lars, you know me very well, and don't lie, just tell them the truth, what you know about me. Because before he had married my wife, my sister, that time my father was in depression before I came to Germany and I was doing good. My mother entrusted my sister in my hands. So, you know, he lived by my place for about months before they got married, before he went back to Germany. He saw the kind of life would be with me in my office before I lost everything. So he knew me so well. Then the material day now came. This was another God's intervention. I was my lawyer. So what happened was from the prison, they were packing people in big buses. It's bus cabs, 20 they go, 20 they go. Now, buses finished, and I was the last person to go to the court. So they said, we are going to delay him. They gave me, they were laughing, you know, the police were saying, for sure you are misdirect. They gave me a private Mercedes Benz with the police to drive me. One police was driving, two police officers want to put me. I said, no, I can't run away. So they put me in the middle, one here, other one here. We drove. I didn't know that really people missed me. The police force had gone where I was staying with my photos. Do you know how do you know to take a risk, you know, about me? How do you know this person? But the responses they got all over where they said for me. They just said, no, we miss this person. We miss this person because I was involved in helping children with mathematics, you know, music and this and that, and people that required. So everybody missed me. And when I came out of this police car, the court outside was so full. I saw, you know, people from church, neighbors. How did they know I was in prison? And we went into court. It was full. And another judge, the prosecutor starts, says, this man has to stay in prison for 1.5 years. He overstayed, he's indicted. Why did he stay long without, you know, submitting himself and everything? So she put her case. Then my lawyer was holding my hands. He says, no, don't worry. It will be good. Then the judge said, okay, now can we hear from Mr. Komona? Then, no, first the prosecutor sent my brother-in-law last outside. He shouldn't hear because of cross-examination. Last went outside with the wife. Then I spoke just about 10 minutes, everything. Then the prosecutor says, bring Mr. Folkman inside. Last came, he was about to go to the box to testify for crossing. Then the judge said, no, I believe what Evans said. We don't need Mr. Folkman. Then the prosecutor, they started arguing with the prosecutor. No, but this is unglaublich. Why should it be like this? He says, no, I believe what Evans has said. Mr. Folkman, you go and sit down. Court right. He beat the table. We rose. My lawyer was telling me, says, I've never seen such kind of a thing. I had said, police is going to work. The man read chapter. See, according to chapter this, Mr. Komona is supposed to be in prison for so long. You're supposed to pay such a fine and everything. But according to my findings, all this period of time, you are such a good person. You are helpful in the community, and I hope you continue being helpful to the community. I sent you back home. Here we don't give permits. Other officers will write to you. I couldn't believe it. I came out of prison and was okay. Then I went to one of the schools, government schools, to say, okay, I visited one of some education and change forms.
He sent you, the judge sent you home for how long?
No, just forever. Forever. There was no condition, even nothing, no condition. No condition. He didn't even say, you report back to this. No, yeah, I remember he just told me, you will be paying every month a penalty fee. You'll be paying every month 5 euros, 5 euros for the next 1 year. That was the only penalty I got, 5 euros per month. He said, if you can't manage 5 euros per month, Then you have to do like manual work somewhere and stuff. Then I said, no, I'm going to do it. Then I knew I was a free man now. I went to one of the schools where I could, just as a freelancer, help teach English and give some motivations to pupils, because I'd done such a lot in Zambia. Then I started with one school, and they warned me, children are trying to be racist and stuff, because in Germany, to find a black teacher in an institute, unheard of. Then, children, the first time, they loved me so much. After 1 week, the principals at what they call principal's desk.
You are speaking English to them in the school?
I was teaching English, yes. I was teaching English. Of course, I could speak German, but I was told, please don't speak German, otherwise they won't concentrate and the like. Yeah, so from one school, then I started receiving emails, about 10 schools or more. They wanted me, and they started, okay, for them probably I would say, anybody would call it an abuse, because, there are children whom are labeled like red. These are impossible. You can't do anything with them. They shout at the teachers, they can drink in class and stuff. I remember being assigned to Slomatic Institute School with these students. Being introduced, we went there inside class. One student shouted at me. Principal wants to scream. I said, no, it's all right. Everything is okay. And he's going to teach you today English for 2 hours, 90 minutes, 5:45. So they looked at me and stuff. Then I sparked, not a topic, just, I said, let me talk about myself, and you tell me everything. I talked about myself. Then I said, yeah, but you seem to be interested. Maybe you could be, okay, let's see what it got. So I started teaching. I didn't realize these boys were I didn't know it had been noisy and stuff. They were so quiet that, because the principal told me, if they do anything, come and ring the bell. They were so quiet. Then the principal got worried. No, this is now almost 2 hours. Mr. Lukomona is not coming to report anybody. Then she came to open the door to see how I was doing. They screamed at her, leave us alone, we are enjoying Mr. Lukomona here. So, and they told me, next lesson was mathematics. They said, I said, no, I have to go. You guys, no, we don't like, we want to, can't you teach mathematics? And I said, I teach, but I don't want to teach. So, everything started. The boys changed. I changed them like nobody's business. Other schools now started using me like a social worker. Down students, yes, they would call me, parents would come. I just tell parents and the teachers, give me 5 minutes. Because for me, 10 minutes is enough to change such kind of children. Because I have to use the experiences from my background, which environment I saw in Germany is not there. Children are just doing whatever they want. They're not like the way we have grown up. Don't do that. Sometimes we are whipped. So I'll use those references or people to power to change them. So a child who didn't scream at me, what do you want to do to me and everything? The parents are watching outside, German parents. Then I told them, say, look, it's your life. Okay, it's not your mother's life or your father's life who did this for you. What kind of a job do you want to do? You want to be working in a restaurant? No, I want to be this and that. Then just pen and paper. Simple advice, which is because there is no career masters here in Germany. They just do what they want. You mean if I don't go to school, I can't get 5,000 euros per month as a salary? No, you're going to be working in the supermarket, 600 euros. That will change. Are you okay now? Are you going to be a good boy and stuff? Are you not going to fight your mother and father anymore? No.
So
give me fight.
So did the school admit you to work there after that?
Dear sir, you will not believe it. Before I come to that, so when I was doing all these things, now the government called me for another court session, okay, where I should get now work permit. So this court session now, students said we are going to, they didn't know I was not getting any money with whatever I was doing. Pupils didn't. So they came class 4, class 5, class 12, big one mixed. The court was full when the judge, the other judge now, finished. He opened the door to come us with the secretary. What are all these doing? Then my lawyer said, no, they came to support EVAS, they are students. But there's no room. So they had to pull desks from some other courts.
So the judge, students were coming from all the schools where you are helping the young people?
Yes. Now they came to this court session, deciding court session for me to get work permit. And students didn't know I had no work permit with what I was doing because I was giving in so much and with my bus from one school to the other, you know.
And you were working as a volunteer. They were not paying you.
Yeah, yes, I was working as a volunteer. Yes, while I was working. Then what happens now? The judge asks my lawyer, "Can you start?" Then my lawyer said, "No, we have come here. You have to start." Then he started talking, Mr. Lukomona, this and that, this and that, and we thank you what you are doing, and hopefully soon you will start getting a salary. Then one of the students, a girl, wrote up, "You mean Mr. Komona doesn't get any money for? He's my best teacher." And another boy. So there's, you know, that's how I saw freedom in Europe. They started screaming at the judge. I was so scared. I said, "Oh my God, these boys, they have great problems with me now." So the lawyer and me and other civil rights people came to support me, stood up to cool it down. And the judge said, "No, please. It's a process this is the last process. In 3 weeks' time, Mr. Komona is going to get a work permit and he's going to start getting money." That's how the court session finished. I think in 2 weeks' time, they invited me, they gave me the cards and work permit. And normally, you know, I really love my board. What normally happens is, whether you have overstayed or not, okay, if you have overstayed 2 to 3 weeks, then the first card you get, the first permit you get is 3 months. You have to renew 3 months, like 4 times for 1 year, 3 months, then you can get 1 year. A letter came, it was a difficult man from the Minister of Home Affairs now, it's called House and the Biwode, Mr. Schwarz, Mr. Black. And everybody, you all don't even forget, it didn't change his mind that he was sent back. I said, "Sure." Then I prayed. But because, you know, DSA, there's one thing I had promised my God in Germany. When I came, to go, when I came, I found a lot of half-castes, colored children, half black, half white. So these children were street kids in Germany, okay? Only with single mothers who are Germans. The men, like, they just wanted to get, you know, because if you impregnate a German woman, she gets a baby, then you get permanent stay in Deutschland, in Germany. I told God, and some people told me, "Even this is what you should do, and you're going to quickly get it." I said, no, I'm a Christian, I can't do that. You can't believe it, DSA, even pastors who came from other countries, they will tell me they were in discourse looking just for girls to impregnate and get papers. I told my God, and I remember telling my church, even before everything started, I said, I would never go. So I will pray to God to use me as an example. Give me right papers so that others should. And DSA, it happened. When I went to Mr. Schwarz's office, we were so like 1,000. My bell rang. Everybody looked at me. Oh, he's going, because they're different from Mr. Schwarz. They were shaking it. I went inside there. He was looking somewhere, a rough man. Then, "Schönen guten Tag." I said, "Schönen guten Tag, sir." He turned around. Then he smiles. "Can you speak English or Dutch?" I said, "No. If you want Dutch or English." Then he started joking with me around. I said, "I want to practice German and stuff." DSA just went to the computer. Okay. But why did you stay long? You should have come quickly and I would have given you the step permit some years back. I said, "Sorry, you know, my friends told me it was a dangerous thing. I would be, you know, tormented." No. He came out with me, DSA, holding me, "Here, let's go." We passed where a lot of people are sitting. He took me to a lady, says, "Please, can you give him a step permit next week?" Because I remember it was a Friday. The lady says, "Why not?" He said, "Mr. Well," then he said, "Good luck." "Thank you so much, sir."
For how long? For how long?
Now, next week when I went, I expected 3 months. Because this is the first stage. So when this office gave me the card, it was already 4 years. 4 years non-stop. I don't have to go back.
4 years permit.
4 years, yes.
Now,
yes,
look, there is a principle here. So most foreigners, they will go and impregnate Germans and do illegal stuff to get a permit and marry illegally and things like that, arrange marriage. But what you did was to go and volunteer as a volunteer teacher teaching English in the public schools.
Yes, the government schools.
In government schools, and you are teaching them for free and teaching the difficult students.
Absolutely, yes.
So you became
yes.
you were making such a good impact on the students that the students themselves were now supportive of you, that they went to court to plead for you, to intercede for you.
Yeah.
So in the court day, there were so many people who came to support you, and the reputation you had was for how many schools did you influence? How many schools?
I was teaching in 6 schools. 6 schools.
6 schools, 1 hour each?
No. I would do 1 hour here. It was not like everyday school. Like today, I would teach in 3 schools, 2 hours, 2 hours. Then tomorrow, another 3 schools, 2 hours, 2 hours. It was like a round robin like that. Sure.
So you are doing 6 schools. So
6 schools,
I
yes.
think the reason why they were able to give you the 4-year permit immediately was because of the good reputation you were hearing. I mean, you were having. So all the government people had heard the report about the good things you are doing in the community. So this is a very good example for everybody who is a migrant in any country, that if you will go and use your gift, if you will go and and do good and use love, the principle of love, the principle of kindness, the principle of service, and that those are the principles that open the doors for you, that even though you had violated the law of the land, you had overstayed for 2 years, 2.5 years, yet they did not deport you because you had done so much investment in the community, you have brought so much good to the people, and you have resolved their problems, and now that volunteer work that you had done had opened the door for you. And so many foreigners would not like to pay such a price. So many foreigners just want a quick fix. They don't want to contribute to their community. But because you are ready to contribute, that is why the Lord bless you like that. So after you got your permit, what did you begin to do?
So when I got to answer your prior question, when I got my work permit, my first thing was, let me choose now maybe just 2 schools where I could work and earn my income. To my amazement was that when I got my permit, I reapplied into the schools. First, I wrote emails to all, thanking them for their support. Now I've got my papers and work permit for 4 years, and I would love to select a school which I would be attached to full-time, or 2 schools part-time, but I can still once in a while come and help with motivations or social working your children. Then all the schools where I'd worked just told me, because there was a change around the same time, the government reduced the budget of schools. So all the schools could not retain me. They couldn't keep me. They told me, no, sorry, Mr. Lukomona, we cannot employ you because now the reforms stipulates that the money budgeted into the educational system is lower for trainers. And I was really disappointed a bit, but then I just took it that way to face a new level of life. One, I'd obtained the step permit, therefore, and work permit. I could use my expertise that I've had already before as an educational businessman. So at that time, what I did was I founded a Diverse Learning Institute where we will do some exchange programs at the same time, looking for jobs now in other institutes. And I was, I think after about a couple of months, I was lucky to be invited to teach the soldiers, the Marines. It was a deal between the German government and the Algerian government. They were building the warships, the submarines. So they wanted technical English, and because also that's my expertise. So there were somebody, who had gotten a job there, told them about me, and they invited me for interviews. They viewed me, and the following week I was training, you know, the soldiers, the colonels, majors, and them in this kind of area. And I trained these soldiers, I think, for 2 years. Yes, for 2 years in Hamburg. Then they were transferred to another city. They took me with and had a good time.
You are teaching them. You are teaching English or what?
I was taking technical English. Technical English.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, related to marine. Yeah.
So is that why is that what you are doing till now?
What I'm doing now, yes, I still teach technical English and business English at the same time. And parallel to that, we introduced what we call the University Foundation programs, which we are going to be teaching right in Germany in English for those who want to, at the end of the day, do their bachelor's or master's in any German school. And that's why I talked about the institute that I registered. So the teaching, we are open the programs. I think after next week we are having our first intake, because in Germany there's only been foundation programs or they are called university entry programs in German language. So you have to do 1.5 years the language. You get C1, then you go and do the foundation for 1 year. So already you have lost 2 years or 3 years just trying to prepare them. But with my institute, I went to the state and told them that I want to bring the Cambridge system here. Instead, they are going to do the A-levels, which are going to be examined by the Cambridge University and in English, because these students we are targeting are coming from outside Zambia. Like at the moment now, we have got some applicants from India, and all these are English-speaking people. They're not ready to go through this language program, then they come into foundation. So they just come with their English, which they have got already, and they do the A-levels, within 1.5 years, and we take them to the university. So
how did you hear about DSA though?
About DSA? Yes, that's quite interesting. Actually, way back in Zambia, I think in the 90s, I heard about you from some circles that there was a man that was, doing something, in the Christian world, in the Russia, because in Zambia, Russia was perceived as a no-go area, and being a black person, it was like, those who were already there trying to get the news and everything, they are not about you. But from me in the 90s, we were just like, okay, that's quite interesting. That's quite interesting. We didn't even concentrate much, because later on, I think I came to learn that this man is Nigerian, and in Zambia, Nigerians are connected to, this kind of businesses. And so with colleagues, we couldn't, dwell so much about knowing you until when I came to Germany. Just when I came to Germany, I think I was trying to Google Pastor from Bahamas, the one who died, Dr. Monroe, yes. Then on the side, there was your interview. I think you were talking about your background, and something like that. It's like the interview was in England, something like that. We're asking you, like, you came to England, some people come here with bodyguards, but you came without bodyguards and you were greeting everybody. So for me, I ended up watching you through this interview, and I didn't watch Miles Monroe. Then next to this video was a video when you were, I think, in Rwanda. You were talking to them after war, what you can do. It was a big session. The interest, then I started Googling. I saw your church, White's only, and I really, I gave it a benefit of doubt. Because, normally in Nigeria, you wouldn't believe it, like in Zambia. Nigeria has been put on the left, that even when an angel falls from heaven to say, this angel is from Nigeria, people would still give it. I'm going to say this, yes. They would give that kind of,
a doubt.
A question mark, a doubt. So now, something convicted me through you. Like, I started like, it sounds so good, so humble. Because you know, I am so empathetic and I love people. You know, I love sharing, making sure people, you know, lead a good life. And I saw something new, like, I'm still not finding something. Then one of the fine days, if I can remember, at church, which I joined a church, there's a lady called Annie Grace. Then we were sharing something. We were talking about, you know, humility and love and stuff. So then I said, Annie Grace, have you heard of Pastor Sunday Adelaja? Then she says, Brother Evans, you know him? I said, no, I heard about him in Zambia, but through YouTube. Then she tells me something. Like
is she a Nigerian?
No. She's a Zimbabwean.
Okay.
Zimbabwean, yes. Yeah, she's now about, I think, 5 years old. She said, you know one thing, we didn't know about this man until at a home cell, German home cell, your brother-in-law, Dr. Lars Hoffman, brought us a video about, I don't know if you were in Germany, something like that. So Lars, my brother-in-law, happened to be there and took a video and he was talking, you know, how Christians should behave and this kind of preaching, something like that. So then slowly I started, you know, following you until then I started looking for some business partners, educational exchange, because I'd done with Zambia, I'd done with Ghana. Then I said, no, let me get some European country. England, we were already exchanging. Then I said, no, let's go East Europe. Ukraine was number first on the target. Then I came across Sister Tatiana. So she's in education and stuff. And one of the days, I think a couple of days after, it was a Sunday, I remember, afternoon. So we were vibing, like chatting, hello, and how was your Sunday? That was my question. How was your Sunday, meaning church service and the like? Then she answered, she didn't hear properly the question because of network. She said, you mean my father, Pastor Sunday, just like that? Then I said, I asked, do you know Pastor Sunday Adelaja? She says, yeah. Do you know him? I said, no, that one is a big man we've heard, and, you know, I started chanting slogans. She laughs. She says, every Sunday, I go to his church. And even she know one thing, she started expanding about, if you want your spiritual life to change. I said, come on, I'm a born again Christian already. He said, read his books, start following him. I said, no, I've been following some YouTube, but it sounds so real. You know, about Nigeria, I started, you know, comparing and stuff. No. She says, no, Eva, listen. And you should come, there's something like HMT, she talked about something. Then I said, I will try and see. So she spoke so, you know, highly. She read just my father, he helped me so much spiritually. And she talked about Pastor Patapaya. You should go to Berlin, there's Pastor Patapaya. You know, this is how he teaches us. So me, I was like, wow. Then one of the fine days I attended Pastor Topez, okay, I'll try Pastor Topez in Frankfurt. HMT. I saw books, assignments. I said, wow, this is amazing. And I said, no, this is where I belong. Because, you know, I love the truth. And, you know, I don't like crooked manners and things. So I saw where things were going. I saw, you know, Pastor Santos followers from different cities who had come for this in Frankfurt, how they were testifying, everything. I said, come on. We are taught in church, just do this and that, commanding, like just following blindly. But these people, they are so like, how do I put it? They are independent. They've got independent mindset. I said, I belong here. I mentioned, no, I testified as a businessman. This is what I've gone through in life. They are giving me numbers. No, read this book, you know. And so that kind of thing. Pastor Natalia in Hamburg, I started going there. Eventually, I started helping them playing the bass guitar in church. It was just a family of, you know, moral successes, business successes, spiritual successes, not hidden agendas, and I just loved it. That's how I attempted now.
And these were all white Europeans and Russians and Ukrainians?
To my amusement, yes. To my amusement, like in Frankfurt, only me and Pastor Tope were the blacks. I remember also with Pastor Tope, before I went to Frankfurt, first he was invited by Pastor Tara in Hamburg. I was singing, playing. Also, later on, he confessed, he said, when I came, I said, oh, no who is this, black man singing Ukrainian songs and playing guitar? So for me, really, DSA, I said, no, this is something real. I thank God that kind of discernment came. I said, no, this is where I belong. This is where I belong. This is really where I belong. And I started, of course, I told my church, it's an African church as well. And I didn't hide. I said, you guys, because we start 14 hours here. I'll be starting from somewhere in the morning. Then I come here and continue with my keyboard and everything. So this is how I came to know, really, I think,
what are the transformations that you have experienced since you started listening and following DSA?
Oh my God. Honestly speaking, DSA, I would say the main thing really that I can underline, because there are different aspects, spiritual transformations and social transformations. From social transformation aspect, when I lost everything, first it was my father. He was a giver, everything. I mean, he was a great person. He's taken away like that. He lost everything. Then it was my elder sister. She helped everything she lost. The husband just kicked her away. Later she died like so poor and stuff. And, I was asking God so many questions, but why God, why should you take people who are caring after, lives and who are Christians? Then I came into the shoes as well. I became so wealthy, bought my mother the same house and my father, which was low, furniture and everything. Later on, I had to lose everything as well. So now, I'm a forgiver. I love people. But there was something before I started listening to some message, which I'm going to mention, which was in my heart. I had forgiven, but I was revenge through succeeding so highly in Germany that those who did things to my father, it was even relatives who ate from him, ran away. Also my sister, they ran away. I will show them back. But then later on, I, listened to your message, which, you talked about being hero worshipped. It is dangerous. It's really a striking point. Being hero worshipped is dangerous because it renders, not that people, for instance, worship me, that I was saying, oh, come and bow before me. No, I can tell you the truth. I became complacent, like I'll just help, give. Even those who are supposed to work hard, they couldn't work hard because Evans was there. So I agreed what you said, that God would remove, this kind of a figure so that other people's eyes might open.
Maybe because your daddy was so successful, people were idolizing him. And because they were idolizing him, they killed him. He had to die because he had taken the place of God. Your sister also had become an object of idolization, and that's why he had to go too. But you two had to lose everything because you had become a source of life for people instead of letting them, live off God. So you got explanation for all these tragedies that are taking place in your life, right?
Yes, really, for sure. But I came to understand this concept after listening to you. I said, wow. And I remember I took a deep, this deep side after that kind of experience. Because for many years, I couldn't believe. I know, for instance, when I lost everything, I didn't question God. God, I'm a good person. I remember when I lost everything, I just prayed, and people were saying, you lost everything, but you are still smiling and everything. I said, what can I do? God took me, and He took away. But sometimes I would sit, even when I get to Germany, why should I work cleaning cars? Everything here, why should, Then when I listened to your messages, I really got energized, and I said, well and good, I had to say forgiveness to God again and forget about what had happened and just to accept the situations and move on and build up again my empire without such kind of references, because that's what happened. Then on the spiritual aspect, after listening to you so much, the book I read so thoroughly was Who Am I, which I helped to edit. Just edit.
Yes.
Yes. Though even that time when I was editing, I wasn't so much into DSA thing, It was just, okay, let me help. But message, especially, especially your lifestyle, okay? Because what I believe in, you can't give to other people what you don't have. You can't advise other people what you never experienced, especially personally. And so your story really impacted me so much. Only 2 people I can remember that those stories have really impacted my life. Your story and that one of Leslie Brown, this motivational speaker. When I was growing up, I didn't know there was anything to do with motivational speakers and everything. So your story, Leslie Brown's story, well, see, this is my background. So I should move on. If these people, DSA could make it, Dr. Brown could make it, I can make it as well. So
you have to change your mind about Nigerians?
Honestly speaking, if Francis, there's a guy here, I lived with some time, I said, I had to change my mindset about Nigerians. And I told him, Francis, not all of them. There's this man, Evans also, he started following you. He says, but where has this man been? Francis' question is an engineer from Cameroon, here in Apple. So, for me anyway, I wouldn't say you came late, but probably you just came at the right time when this kind of transformation is going on. And that takes me to the next level of how my life changed after listening to you. Because the messages we grew up with, especially from the 90s when we went to Lusaka, from the 90s when things were being spoiled, like in Zambia, I don't know in Nigeria when prosperity started coming in, and I never, I found it difficult to be stable in Christianity, which church to go to. So until I pounced on you, your messages of church shift, love, how pastors have to behave, I said, no, this is self-landing. This is self-landing. This is self-landing. It's so broad. It is so broad to itemize right here. Just your messages can change the world. If just a handful of pastors, DSA, would come out like you have come out, not even citing, mistakes they are making. If they would come out like you have come out, the world would be a peaceful world. The world would be a peaceful world, DSA.
What have you decided to do with this message, and what have you started to do?
Oh my God, yes. And coincidentally, just to say something, because I moved slightly 20 minutes from Hamburg, central Hamburg, to another quiet city called Schwarzenberg. And this is where I registered and launched an NGO called Twikatane, means Zusammenhalt in German, or let's hold hands together for the better. And one of the departments is Mwimbileni, sing for God and spread the word of God, apart from, helping refugees and African orphans and widows. So with DSA, Twikatane's first point is to air your messages, pre-recorded messages on radio. Already we are in touch with, they started airing. They did some samples a couple of weeks before. I think, some 2 months ago, if I'm not mistaken, they did air some sounds from you from radio. And also, we are starting the newspaper with, of course, I started with some colleagues, but they got scared in Kitwe, Jonas, and them. It's like good it bad. I partnered with another entrepreneur in Zambia. He was a manager director in the big newspapers, the time of Zambia 4 years old. He opened his own media center. And when I sent him your messages, he says, Mr. Evans, let us start publishing in newspaper, and we put them on air. So this is what we're doing. For me, I'm not promoting DSA, I'm promoting the kingdom. Because this is, ever since I was born, there was a gap of period of time where things were okay. Being born from my family in evangelical, everything was great. Until the 90s, when we left evangelical, we joined the Pentecostal era, it was all confusion. Now it's like DSA's messages, you have brought back what was lost, and you have brought back the way the church is supposed to run. Anybody who is trying to call you names and everything, for me, I just learn, even sometimes when I read comments, it is supposed to be part of the process. It is supposed to be part of the processes to receive ours, but keep standing, and I know it's going to work out. God willing, I will be traveling to Zambia even next June, July, something like God willing, and we continue pushing your way, because Zambia is a victim. Is a victim, especially by Nigerian pastors. And Nigerian, when he's not a pastor, he will just take a briefcase and land in Zambia, Nigeria. He's going to make it. He will start spreading. He's going to be rich, because all the churches in Zambia believe if you don't invite a Nigerian pastor, small or big, you're not a church. They even ask you, do you receive Nigerian pastor? I say, that's the way it is. And so for me, what you started DSA, you had created, a platform to step on. You reduced, my job long before. I told God, I don't just want to end up being an entrepreneur or something else. I want to give back to God. Of course, I love music, through music, which we are promoting through Trikatane, and evangelizing. Now, where to start from evangelizing was a problem, I haven't been to a Bible school. Of course, I know the truth. But when these messages started, I said, no ways. I will start with DSA's messages, spread them, let the people know the truth. And this is what we are doing with messages.
Funny enough, we have many people from Zambia who are actually active on DSA platform.
That's really great. That's really great. That's really great.
So I think you will have some good support on the ground.
I should think so, yes. I should think so, yes. This is really great, because we've never had, you can imagine, okay, let me take Pentecostals now, something before I forget. When we had our first president, who was removed in 1991 by Chiluba, who declared Zambia the country to be declared as a Christian nation in 1991, it was Chiluba, not knowing that he had a hidden agenda to sell the country and to steal, to loot the country. The church system was sound. But when Chiluba came in 1992, I remember very well, he introduced a fund, prerogative fund, a presidential prerogative fund of, I think, $20 million every year, pocket money to give to people he wanted. So from that pocket money, 3/4, he bought pastors. You can't believe it. He bought pastors. Danny Pule, maybe you know Danny Pule, Dunamis Center, with the Dunamis Center, he bought him, great pastors in Zambia. And all these pastors I'm talking about, DSA, they are down, they are fallen. Either they're just on streets or they don't have anything that they do. So Chiluba helped to destroy the Pentecostal, system in Zambia. Introduced, these money issues. Nigerians started coming now, they would be there on TV. Before they go, money issues now, sprung up. I still remember. It was the Nigerians who started selling anointing oil when it came to Zambia. First time they started coming. So it's a Nigerian, $300, people running the streets and everything until today. But thank you so much, really, for your messages. I know the impact is really spreading, and it's going to spread much more.
What will you tell people who are watching us before we go? Because in the next 20 minutes, we have to, 40 minutes, actually 20 minutes, we have to go on live for the...
First and foremost, it's just a round of a motivational line. Please, especially those people that are in diaspora, let us hold on to our values. And that came back with, I know, especially African Christianity, whether in Nigeria, Zambia, Ghana, Zimbabwe, we grew up with the fear of our parents. Okay, we respected them, and that kind of respect has really helped me to settle, even in Europe here. I go to Ukraine, I go to Spain, I go everywhere. I go to do some speeches. It's not because of me, because of what my parents passed on. I've carried, those values. I haven't done away with them, and I impart into the Europeans. That lacks in the Europeans. They aren't brought up like that. So let us hold on to that kind of family and use it. Let us maintain our culture. Of course, let us integrate in any countries where we are. Let their languages and learn their systems, and we're going to flourish. At the same time, nothing comes just like that. I'm not saying that I'm rich or I'm doing very well in Germany to say this, but when hard times come, hold on to your goals. As long as your goals are within the legal frameworks, they are not there to, injure other people's feet, and success is bound. Finally, to conclude, it is on DSA. for me, when a couple of months we received the 500th year of Martin Luther King Church Transformation, I call the DSA. It sounds like a joke, but this is real. No man has stood like DSA in trying to foster change, taking back the church where it belongs. So all those that are listening, whether you are following DSA, whether you dispute and everything, thank God the scriptures are there. DSA doesn't just speak from his own end. He's always referring to the scriptures. And it's so easy. Follow DSA. Read his books and your life will never be the same. Not just your life. This is one of the things that I've seen with us Africans. We center everything on me. Let us think of our children's children. This is my worry. Our children's children. If we end up everything Christian, spiritual, we follow the truth, even our offspring will carry it over. And the church set up will get back to where it used to be. Inception. So those are my last words.
Beautiful, beautiful. I had some of your videos, but I couldn't even show them because you are so captivating. You are talking, we have transfixed on you that we couldn't even remember to go and get the videos. Well, thank you so very much. Keep on doing the good work. That is a very high standard you have just left for people, that people can get permission and become legal and respected in the society without breaking the law, without violating any rules, but by just using the principle of love and kindness and service. And you have shown that to us. And I'm glad for you, and I believe in a greater future for you ahead. So we'll see you all in the next 20 minutes. We'll come back again to continue the next live broadcast. Peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Pleasure. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Bye.